In this lesson, we will trace the development of a plantation economy in the American South and explain the way of life in the southern colonies. If you look at the painting in front of you on the video, the painting shows the hierarchy on a plantation, with the big house at the top and the center, and smaller houses supporting the big house, and the docks and the merchant ships at the bottom along the river. This folk art painting shows an aristocratic southern mansion perched high on a hill, dominating the warehouses, mill, slave quarters, and other buildings that helped make the plantation self-sufficient. Along the river, a ship carries the plantation's products into the wider world. Life in the South was different depending on the social class and race that you were a part of. Wealthy planters hired tutors to teach their children, but most Southern children did not have money for tutors, so they did not have any education. Southern farmers grew cash crops, which were grown for sale, not for the farmer's own use. In South Carolina and in Georgia, they grew rice and indigo. Indigo is pictured here, and rice is pictured here. The richest planters lived in Virginia and Maryland and North Carolina, and they grew tobacco, which was one of the most profitable cash crops in the South. Farming makes up the Southern economy. Towns did not develop except along port cities like Savannah and Charleston. Farmers didn't need to go to town with their crops. They loaded ships along the rivers, and they didn't need port towns for storage either. Plantations and family gardens allowed Southerners to be self-sufficient, which meant that they provided everything that they needed from their own plantation. Things that you would find in towns, like schools and shops, did not really develop, and most Southerners stayed illiterate. Rich planters controlled the economy, even though they were the minority, and the majority of people in the South were poor farmers. Wealthy planters could afford imports from Europe. They could afford to send their children to school through the use of a tutor and a workforce for the plantation. Women in America had very few rights. As children, girls learned to cook, to sew, to garden, to milk cows, to feed chickens, clean the house, and care for any children. They learned to be good housewives. Women married as young as 12 or 13 and became the property of their husbands. They had children every 1 to 2 years and were responsible for their daily care. Men made all the household decisions. Indentured servants came to America to work for a predetermined number of years to repay the cost of their passage. They were the first workforce on the plantations. For wealthy planters, these people were cheap labor. They became less desirable after Bacon's rebellion because they had demanded rights, and that was scary for the wealthy plantation owners who did not want to lose their power. Improving economy in England also allowed many people who would have come as indentured servants to make a living there, so they stayed in England instead. There was very harsh treatment of indentured servants in America, and a very high death rate, and that discouraged others. It wasn't worth the risk to them. Native Americans were less desirable as slaves because they didn't want to learn European ways, and because they could run away and disappear, and they knew the area very well so that they would not be found. So the Southern labor force starts out with indentured servants. As there are less indentured servants, and Native Americans don't really make good slaves, the solution to the growing labor problem in the South is going to be wealthy plantation owners beginning to import slaves from Africa. And they will become the primary workforce in the South.